The Swiss Alps always made me feel like I could breathe properly again. After a year working in Tokyo for an international pharmaceutical company, managing clinical trial logistics across 3 continents, I desperately needed the silence that only my mountain cabin could provide. The elevation alone felt therapeutic, as if every breath at 8,000 feet scrubbed away the accumulated stress of conference calls at midnight and navigating foreign regulatory frameworks in a language I barely spoke. I had purchased the cabin 3 years earlier, with money from my grandmother's estate. She had always told me to invest in something that made my soul happy, not just my bank account. I could still hear her voice, warm and certain, the last time we sat together in her garden. She had taken my hand and said, "Chloe, money comes and goes, but a place that feeds your spirit, that's worth everything." The small wooden structure sat on 2 acres of pristine wilderness outside Aspen, surrounded by aspens that turned golden every autumn and stayed skeletal and beautiful through winter. It had been my sanctuary, my escape from the corporate grind of pharmaceutical project management. The drive from Denver took 4 hours, winding through mountain passes that still held patches of snow, even though it was late May. I had timed my return deliberately, wanting to arrive when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, and the hiking trails were accessible, but not yet crowded with summer tourists. My plan was simple: 2 weeks of complete isolation, reading the stack of novels I had shipped ahead, hiking until my legs burned, and eating simple meals while watching the sunset paint the peaks orange and pink. But as I turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to my property, something felt wrong. The gate was open. I always kept it locked, and I had the only key with me in Tokyo. My heart rate picked up as I drove slowly up the gravel path, scanning the trees for any sign of intruders or damage. Wildlife sometimes caused problems at high elevations, but bears did not open gates. Then I saw it. A silver SUV parked where my space should have been empty. A vehicle I recognized immediately because I had helped make the down payment 2 years ago, when my younger sister Vanessa begged for help after her third failed business venture. My stomach dropped as I pulled up beside it, my rental car suddenly feeling too small and inadequate next to her gleaming vehicle. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, trying to process what I was seeing. Vanessa lived in Boulder in a condo I also knew about because she frequently complained about the rent. She had no reason to be here, no permission to be here. I had not spoken to her in nearly 4 months, not since our last phone call ended with her asking for money again, and me finally setting a boundary by saying no. That conversation had been harder than I expected. She had cried, accused me of abandoning her, told me I was the only person who understood her struggles. But I had held firm, my voice shaking as I said, "Vanessa, I can't keep doing this. You need to find another way." The cabin looked different as I approached. The flower boxes under the windows held fresh plants, bright geraniums that I had not planted. The welcome mat was new, a cheerful pattern that clashed with the rustic aesthetic I had carefully maintained. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out my key, but before I could insert it into the lock, the door swung open. Vanessa stood there wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, holding a coffee mug that I recognized as part of the set I kept in the cabin. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she smiled at me as if this was completely normal, as if she had every right to be standing in my doorway. "Chloe! Oh my God, you're back early. I thought you weren't coming until June." She stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter my own property. Come in, you must be exhausted from the drive." I walked past her, my body moving on autopilot while my brain struggled to catch up with the situation. The living room looked mostly the same, but there were subtle changes. A different throw blanket on the sofa, magazines I did not subscribe to on the coffee table, framed photos on the mantel that I had never placed there, including several of Vanessa with people I did not recognize. One photo showed her laughing with a group on what looked like my back deck, drinks in hand, as if she had been hosting parties in my home. "What are you doing here?" I managed to ask, setting my bag down on the floor. My voice sounded strange, too calm for what I was feeling. "Oh, well, I've been staying here for a bit. Things got complicated with the condo situation." And I remembered you were abroad, and it just seemed silly for this place to sit empty when I needed somewhere quiet to figure things out. She said it casually, as if borrowing someone's mountain retreat for months was perfectly reasonable between sisters. You don't mind, right? I've been taking really good care of it. Before I could respond, before I could even begin to articulate the violation I was feeling, she continued talking, pulling me toward the kitchen with an enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. Actually, I'm so glad you're here because I want to show you something. I did a little renovation project. The kitchen was so outdated, Chloe. I mean, those cabinets were practically from the 1980s, and the countertops were just sad. So I had it remodeled. It looks amazing now. She pushed open the kitchen door with a flourish, like a game show host revealing a prize. I stopped breathing. My kitchen was gone. The warm pine cabinets I had refinished myself, spending 3 weekends carefully stripping and restaining the wood, had been replaced with stark white modern units. I could still remember the smell of the wood stain, the ache in my shoulders from the repetitive motion, the satisfaction of seeing the grain emerge rich and beautiful under my hands. The butcher block countertops I had saved for months to afford were now cold gray quartz. The vintage farmhouse sink I had found at an estate sale was gone, replaced with a sleek undermount basin. Even the tile backsplash had been changed. The hand-painted Portuguese tiles I had brought back from a conference in Lisbon, each one carefully wrapped and transported across an ocean, were now replaced with generic white subway tiles. "Isn't this gorgeous?" Vanessa beamed, running her hand along the quartz. "It was just $55,000. Such a steal. Honestly, the contractor said it would normally cost $70,000, but he gave me a discount because I let him use photos for his portfolio." The number hit me like a physical blow. $55,000. I opened my mouth, then closed it, unable to form words. My vision blurred at the edges, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. The Portuguese tiles had taken me an entire afternoon to find, wandering through a street market in Lisbon after a conference session ended early. The vendor had been an elderly woman who spoke no English, and I had used a translation app to learn that each tile had been painted by her mother decades ago. I had bought every single one she had left, 24 tiles that I had carried home like treasures. 55,000, I repeated slowly. "Where did you get $55,000, Vanessa?" She waved her hand dismissively, already moving to the new coffee maker on the counter, another expensive appliance I had not purchased. "Oh, don't worry about that right now. Let me make you a cappuccino. This machine is incredible. It costs $2,000, but the milk frother is like something from a professional cafe." "Vanessa," my voice was sharper now, cutting through her cheerful chatter. "Where did you get the money?" She turned to face me, and for the first time, something flickered across her expression. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. It was hard to tell with Vanessa. She had always been good at rearranging her features to show what she thought people wanted to see. "I used your credit cards," she said finally, as if admitting to borrowing a cup of sugar. "But before you get upset, let me explain. I knew you would want this done eventually anyway. The kitchen was a disaster, and I figured with your fancy pharmaceutical job and living expenses covered in Tokyo, you could afford it. Think of it as an investment in the property value." My legs felt weak. I pulled out one of the new bar stools, another purchase I had not authorized, and sat down heavily. "You used my credit cards, multiple cards, to spend $55,000 on renovating my property without my permission." "Grandma left both of us money, Chloe. You got more because you were older, but that doesn't mean you get to hoard all the nice things. This cabin should be for both of us. Family. Shares." Her tone had shifted, becoming defensive, the words tumbling out faster. "And honestly, I thought you would be grateful. I've been maintaining this place, keeping it clean, making sure pipes didn't freeze last winter. You were on the other side of the world, not even thinking about it." The audacity of her logic made me dizzy. She had broken into my home, stolen my financial information, spent enough money to buy a decent car, and now she was acting as if I should thank her for it. "How did you even get my credit card information?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm, to gather facts before I exploded. You left some paperwork in the desk drawer last time I visited. I just thought it was smart to keep the information handy in case of emergencies. She shrugged as if this was perfectly reasonable planning. And technically, this was an emergency. My mental health was really suffering in Boulder. I needed a change of environment. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this person with the little sister I had protected throughout childhood, the one I had helped with homework and defended against bullies, the one I had loaned money to repeatedly, co-signed leases for, bailed out of bad decisions more times than I could count. I remembered her at 8 years old, crying because kids at school had made fun of her mismatched clothes. I had given her my favorite sweater, told her she looked beautiful, walked her to class with my arm around her shoulders. When had she become this? Or had she always been this, and I had been too busy playing the role of responsible older sister to notice? "You need to leave," I said quietly. "Right now, pack your things and get out." "Chloe, come on!" Her voice took on a wheedling quality. "Don't be dramatic. Where am I supposed to go? I let the condo go because I couldn't afford it anymore. I've been living here for 5 months. You can't just kick me out." 5 months. The timeline clicked into place with horrible clarity. "You've been living in my cabin since January. You moved in the moment I left for Tokyo." "You weren't using it, and I needed somewhere to stay. What was I supposed to do? Be homeless?" She crossed her arms, her expression shifting to the wounded victim look she had perfected over the years. "You've always had everything, Chloe. The better grades, the better job, grandma's favorite. The least you can do is share this one thing." The familiar guilt tried to surface, the trained response of the older sibling who had always been told to look out for her younger sister. But beneath it, a cold anger was building, an anger that had been compressed and ignored for too many years. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked. "Did you think you could spend $55,000 on my credit cards and I would just never notice?" "I was going to pay you back eventually," she said, but her eyes would not meet mine. "Once my online boutique takes off, I'm working on a business plan." "Your fifth business plan? Or is it the sixth? I've lost count of how many ventures I've funded that never materialized." I stood up, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through my body. "I want you out today. I'll give you 2 hours to pack." "You can't do this." Her voice rose, panic creeping into the edges. "I have tenant rights. I've been living here for 5 months. You have to give me proper notice." "You're not a tenant. You're a squatter who committed credit card fraud." The words came out cold and clear. "And if you're not gone by evening, I'll call the police and explain exactly what you've done." Her face flushed red. "You wouldn't dare. I'm your sister." "You stopped acting like my sister the moment you decided to steal from me." I walked past her, needing to see the rest of the damage, to understand the full scope of what she had done. The master bedroom had been taken over completely. Her clothes filled the closet I had built with custom cedar shelving. The bathroom counter was covered with expensive skincare products, makeup, and hair tools. The bed had new linens, a designer duvet set that probably cost more than my entire month's rent in Tokyo. I picked up one of the skincare jars, $200 for face cream. Another jar, $350. A serum, $420. My hands started shaking again. In the second bedroom, which I had used as an office, I found evidence of her supposed business venture. A laptop surrounded by product samples, pricing spreadsheets, and marketing materials for an online jewelry store that appeared to exist only in planning stages. The desk drawers held more discoveries, shopping receipts, credit card statements that should have been coming to my address in Tokyo, but had clearly been intercepted, and a notebook filled with calculations that made my blood run cold. She had not just used my credit cards for the kitchen renovation. The statement showed charges going back months. Furniture purchases, electronics, clothing, restaurant bills, spa treatments, a hot tub installation that I had not even noticed yet, probably around the back of the cabin. The total, from what I could quickly calculate, was well over $90,000. $90,000 of my money spent while I was working 70-hour weeks in a foreign country, managing pharmaceutical trials that could save lives, living in a tiny apartment because I was trying to be responsible with my finances. I heard Vanessa coming down the hallway, her footsteps tentative now. She appeared in the doorway, and whatever she saw on my face made her step back. "It's not as bad as it looks," she started, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." I gathered the credit card statements, my hands steady despite the rage vibrating through my entire body. "I'm going into town. When I get back in 3 hours, you will be gone. Every single thing you brought here, you will take with you. If I find even a toothbrush that belongs to you, I'll add it to the police report I'm going to file." "Police report?" Her voice cracked. "Chloe, please. You're overreacting. We can work this out. I'll pay you back, I promise." "Your promises are worthless." I walked past her again, grabbing my bag from the living room. 3 hours, Vanessa. And I want the house key you made." "I don't have another key." The lie was automatic, but her eyes gave her away. "Fine, then I'll change the locks. Add it to your tab." I headed for the door, needing to get out before I said something I might regret, or before the years of trained sisterly loyalty made me weak. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "To talk to a lawyer, and then to the bank, and then to file a police report for fraud and identity theft." I turned back to look at her one last time. "You wanted to know why I always got everything? It's because I worked for it. I earned it. I didn't steal it from people who loved me." I drove down the mountain too fast, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. The town of Aspen was busy with early-season tourists, but I barely noticed the crowds as I found parking and walked into the first law office I could find. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, took one look at my face and somehow got me an immediate consultation with a partner. Attorney Catherine Ross was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an efficient manner. She listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and studied me for a long moment. "You have a strong case for pressing charges," she said. "Identity theft, fraud, unauthorized use of credit cards. The amount involved pushes this into felony territory." She paused, her expression serious. "But I have to ask, are you prepared for what that means? She's your sister. This won't just affect her, it will affect your entire family. There will be consequences beyond the legal system." "I don't care." The words surprised me with their vehemence. "I've spent my entire life protecting her from consequences." Look where that got me. Catherine nodded slowly. "Then here's what we need to do. First, document everything. Every charge, every unauthorized change to your property. Do you have security cameras at the cabin?" I felt a jolt of memory. Yes, I installed them before I left for Tokyo. They're motion activated and upload to cloud storage. I had completely forgotten about them with everything happening. "Perfect." Catherine was already typing notes into her computer. "Access those recordings immediately. We need to establish that she entered the property without permission and that she took your financial information without authorization. Then we need statements from the contractors who did the work, proof that she presented herself as the owner or as having authority to make those changes." She looked up at me. "I also recommend getting a restraining order. If she's been living there for 5 months, she may cause problems when you try to remove her. Some people become dangerous when they're cornered." We spent the next hour going over details, filing initial paperwork, and creating a timeline of events. Catherine introduced me to a colleague who specialized in financial fraud, and together they mapped out a strategy that was both thorough and ruthless. They explained the difference between civil and criminal cases, how the criminal charges would be prosecuted by the state regardless of my wishes once filed, how the civil suit would allow me to seek financial restitution. By the time I left the law office, it was late afternoon. I stopped at the bank to freeze my credit cards, file fraud reports, and begin the process of disputing the charges. The banker, a sympathetic woman named Jennifer, walked me through each step and promised to flag my accounts for any suspicious activity. "I see this more often than you would think," she told me quietly as we filled out forms. "Family members who think they're entitled to access. It's always hardest when it's someone you trusted. But you're doing the right thing by acting quickly. The longer fraud goes unreported, the harder it is to recover from." My last stop was the police station. The officer who took my report was professional but clearly uncomfortable with the family dynamics. He was young, probably in his late 20s, and kept glancing at me as if trying to reconcile the well-dressed woman in front of him with the story of family betrayal I was telling. He assured me that they would investigate, that the evidence I was gathering would be crucial, and that I should not hesitate to call if Vanessa became threatening or refused to leave. Family disputes can escalate quickly, he warned, especially when someone realizes they're facing criminal charges. Don't confront her alone if you can help it. When I finally drove back up the mountain, the sun was setting behind the peaks, painting everything in shades of orange and purple. It should have been beautiful. It should have been the peaceful homecoming I had imagined during the long flight from Tokyo. Instead, it felt like driving toward a confrontation I should have had years ago. The silver SUV was gone when I arrived. The cabin sat silent and empty, the new welcome mat somehow mocking in the fading light. I sat in my car for a long moment, gathering my courage before I finally went inside to see what damage my sister had left in her wake. The cabin felt violated as I walked through it room by room. Vanessa had indeed left, but her departure had been spiteful rather than apologetic. In the kitchen, cabinet doors hung open, revealing that she had taken half the dishes, including pieces from a hand-painted set my grandmother had given me. The expensive coffee maker was gone. So was the new toaster, the blender, and most of the premium cookware she had apparently purchased with my money. The living room was missing the throw blankets, decorative pillows, and a hand-woven rug that had been a gift from a colleague in Peru. She had unscrewed bulbs from lamps, leaving the fixtures useless. The framed photos remained on the mantel, as if she wanted me to see the evidence of the life she had built here in my absence, pretending this was her home. In the master bedroom, the expensive linens were gone, stripped from the bed and taken along with most of the hangers from the closet. She had left a mess of tissue paper and shopping bags, evidence of her spending spree scattered across the floor like accusations. I found receipts in the trash: designer shoes, $800, a handbag, $2,300, jewelry, over $4,000. Each receipt felt like another slap. But the office was the worst. She had taken the laptop, of course, but she had also cleared out files from the desk, including personal documents I had stored there: birth certificate, passport copies, tax returns. My stomach twisted as I realized she had even more of my information than I had initially thought. The notebook with her calculations was gone too, probably because it contained evidence of her fraud. I found her parting message on the bathroom mirror, written in lipstick. "You always were selfish." The words hung there in smudged red, distorted in my vision as tears finally came. Not tears of sadness, but of rage so pure it burned. I grabbed a towel and scrubbed at the mirror until the lipstick was gone, and my reflection stared back at me, wild-eyed and disheveled from travel and anger. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're happy. You just made your own sister homeless. Mom would be so disappointed in you." I blocked the number immediately, then called Catherine. She answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. "She's gone, but she took a lot of things, including some of my personal documents," I said without preamble. "Birth certificate, tax returns, things she could use to open more accounts in my name. File an additional police report tonight. Document what's missing and freeze your credit immediately through all 3 bureaus. I'll file for an emergency restraining order first thing tomorrow morning." Catherine's voice was calm but urgent. "Chloe, this is escalating. People like your sister, when they feel cornered, they often lash out. Be careful. Don't stay there alone if you can avoid it." After we hung up, I spent 2 hours documenting everything. I took photos of every room, every empty space where something had been, every bit of damage. Then I logged into the security camera system, my heart pounding as I navigated to the archived footage. The recordings were comprehensive. The cameras had captured Vanessa arriving in January, just 3 days after I left for Tokyo. The footage showed her using a key to enter, which meant she had made a copy at some point during her previous visit. I remembered that visit now. She had stayed for a weekend in November, claiming she needed a break from Boulder. I had given her the spare key so she could come and go freely. She must have taken it to a locksmith then. Over the following weeks, the cameras captured delivery trucks, contractor vehicles, furniture shipments. One clip showed Vanessa on her phone, gesturing animatedly at the kitchen, while a man in work clothes took notes. She was clearly giving instructions, acting as if she owned the place. But the most damning footage was from a day in March. The camera in the office had captured Vanessa rifling through my desk, finding my credit cards and financial documents. She had photographed them with her phone, taking multiple pictures to ensure she had all the numbers and security codes. The timestamp and her clear face in the frame were perfect evidence of premeditation. She had not stumbled into this fraud. She had planned it, executed it methodically. I downloaded everything, backed it up in 3 separate locations, and sent copies to Catherine. Then I finally allowed myself to collapse on the sofa, which at least Vanessa had not taken with her, and stared at the ceiling while my mind raced through possibilities. The money was one thing. $90,000 was catastrophic, but I could potentially recover some of it through fraud claims and insurance. My credit could be repaired, my documents replaced, the locks changed. But the violation of trust, the calculated betrayal by someone I had loved and protected my entire life, that damage felt irreparable. My phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. We had not spoken since Christmas. A strained video call where she had criticized my decision to take the Tokyo assignment and suggested I was abandoning my family responsibilities. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another call, then a text. Vanessa told me what you did. How could you throw her out? She has nowhere to go. Call me immediately. I turned off my phone. The next morning, I woke early from restless sleep and drove back to town. The bank opened at 9, and I was waiting at the door with my documentation. Jennifer walked me through the fraud dispute process, filling out forms for each unauthorized charge. The total, when calculated officially, was $93,472. The credit card companies will investigate, Jennifer explained. With the video evidence and police reports, you have a strong case for recovery, but it will take time, probably several months. In the meantime, those charges are on your cards, accumulating interest. Can I make a withdrawal from my savings to pay them off while the disputes are processed? I asked. I don't want my credit destroyed while we wait for justice. You can, but I wouldn't recommend wiping out your emergency fund. Let's see what the investigation turns up first. She hesitated, then added quietly, I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. People like your sister count on their victims being too guilty or too tired to fight back. At the police station, Detective Marcus Russell took my additional report and reviewed the security footage I had brought on a flash drive. He was younger than I expected, probably in his early 30s, with a serious demeanor that inspired confidence. This is excellent evidence, he said, watching the footage of Vanessa photographing my credit cards. Clear premeditation. Combined with the amounts involved, we're looking at multiple felony charges. Identity theft, fraud, possibly forgery if she signed your name on any contracts with the contractors. How long before charges are filed? I asked. I'll present this to the district attorney this week. Given the evidence, I expect they'll move forward quickly. He paused, studying me. But I have to warn you, family cases get complicated. There will be pressure on you to drop the charges. Are you prepared for that? I met his eyes steadily. I'm more prepared than I've ever been for anything. Detective Russell nodded. Good, because based on what I'm seeing here, your sister has probably done this before. People don't start with $93,000 in fraud. They work up to it. Has she ever had access to your information previously? The question stopped me cold. She's asked to borrow money several times over the years. I co-signed a lease for her once, about 5 years ago. And she stayed at my apartment in Denver for a few months 3 years ago when she was between places. I would suggest pulling your credit report going back several years, he said carefully. Look for anything unusual, accounts you don't recognize, inquiries you didn't authorize. If there's a pattern, it strengthens our case significantly. I left the station with a growing sense of dread and drove to a coffee shop with reliable internet. Using my laptop, I pulled comprehensive credit reports from all three bureaus. What I found made me physically ill. 3 credit cards I had not opened, all currently maxed out. A personal loan from 2 years ago for $15,000 that I had never applied for. Multiple hard inquiries on my credit from various financial institutions, each one a red flag I had never seen because Vanessa had been intercepting my mail. The fraud had not started with the cabin. It had been going on for years, small enough that I had not noticed, spread out enough that no single incident raised alarms. The total damage, including the cabin expenses, exceeded $130,000. I called Catherine immediately. She answered with her characteristic efficiency, but I heard her sharp intake of breath when I explained what I had found. "This changes everything," she said. "This isn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This is systematic financial exploitation. I'm going to recommend we pursue this both criminally and civilly. You need to sue her for her recovery of funds, and we need to make sure the criminal charges reflect the full scope of her fraud." "She doesn't have any money," I said numbly. "That's why she kept stealing from me. What's the point of suing someone who has nothing?" "2 reasons," Catherine replied. "First, legal judgments don't expire. If she ever does come into money, you can collect. Second, it creates a paper trail that protects you. If she tries to claim you gave her permission or that this was some family arrangement, we have court documents proving otherwise. This protects your future, Chloe." I spent the rest of the day at the coffee shop making calls, filling out forms, documenting fraud claims. Each institution had different requirements, different timelines. Some were sympathetic. Others treated me like I was trying to scam them by disputing legitimate charges. One representative actually said, "But this is your sister. Surely you gave her permission to use your cards." I had to explain 3 times that no, theft by a family member was still theft. By the time the sun started setting, I had spoken to 14 different people across 7 financial institutions, and my head throbbed with a migraine. My phone, which I had turned back on, was flooded with messages. 11 from Mom, each more frantic and accusatory than the last. 5 from Vanessa, alternating between begging for forgiveness and threatening to ruin my reputation. 3 from an aunt I barely spoke to, lecturing me about family loyalty. 2 from cousins, who apparently now had opinions about my relationship with Vanessa. Only one message offered support. My best friend from graduate school, Teresa, who lived in Portland, and who I had texted earlier about the situation. "This is insane. Come visit and get away from this mess. Or I can come there. You shouldn't be alone right now." I texted back, "Can't leave yet, too much to handle, but thank you." Her response was immediate. "I'm serious. I can work remotely for a week. I'm booking a flight now. You need someone in your corner." I wanted to tell her not to come, that I could handle this alone the way I handled everything alone. But the truth was, I desperately needed an ally. Someone who was not going to make excuses for Vanessa or tell me I was overreacting. "Okay," I typed back. "Thank you." That evening, back at the cabin, I finally listened to Mom's voicemails. They devolved from concern to anger to manipulation over the course of the day. "Chloe, honey, please call me. Vanessa is devastated. She made a mistake, but she's family. I don't understand why you're being so cruel about this. She was just trying to help make the cabin nicer. You know how hard things have been for her. She's always struggled, and you've always had it easy. Is it really necessary to involve lawyers? Your father would be ashamed of how you're treating your sister. Family is supposed to forgive. Fine, don't call me back, but don't come crying to me when you realize you've destroyed your relationship with your only sibling over money." The last message was from earlier this evening, Mom's voice cold. "Vanessa told me you're trying to have her arrested. If you go through with this, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving or Christmas. I won't have someone in my home who would betray their own family like this." I saved all the voicemails, adding them to my documentation folder. Catherine had told me to keep everything, that threats and manipulative messages could be relevant if Vanessa escalated further. Then I called my grandmother's sister, Aunt Dorothy, who was 91 and living in a retirement community in Boulder. She had always been my favorite relative, sharp-minded and unsentimental in ways that the rest of the family found uncomfortable, but I found refreshing. "Chloe, darling," she answered warmly, "I heard about the situation with Vanessa. Your mother called me yesterday trying to get me to talk sense into you." "What did you tell her?" I asked wearily. "I told her that you're displaying more sense than anyone else in this family has shown in years." Her voice was firm. "Your sister is a thief. Your mother is an enabler. And you're finally standing up for yourself. It's about time." Relief washed over me so strongly I had to sit down. "Everyone else thinks I'm being terrible. Everyone else is uncomfortable with conflict and would rather pressure you to be a victim than deal with the fact that Vanessa has a problem." Aunt Dorothy sighed. "Your grandmother worried about this, you know. She told me before she died that she feared Vanessa would never learn to stand on her own because everyone kept catching her when she fell. She left us both money in her will," I said. "Vanessa spent hers in 6 months." "I know. Your grandmother knew it would happen. That's why she left you more and put conditions on your inheritance. She trusted you to be responsible." There was a pause. "Chloe, I want you to know something. When your grandmother helped you buy that cabin, she told me she was giving you roots, a place that was yours where you could always return. Don't let Vanessa take that from you." We talked for another hour, and by the time we hung up, I felt more grounded than I had since returning from Tokyo. Aunt Dorothy promised to run interference with Mom, and to make it clear that she supported my decisions completely. Teresa arrived 2 days later, sweeping into the cabin with her characteristic energy. 2 suitcases, a bag of groceries, and a bottle of expensive whiskey. "Okay," she announced, setting everything down. "I'm here to provide moral support, strategic planning, and excellent meals. Also, I brought booze because you look like you need it." I hugged her tightly, feeling some of the tension in my shoulders finally release. Teresa had been my roommate in graduate school when I was getting my degree in pharmaceutical sciences. She worked in environmental consulting now, managing cleanup, projects for contaminated sites, and she had a no-nonsense approach to problems that I desperately needed. We spent the evening catching up, drinking whiskey, and going through all my documentation. Teresa had a background in project management, and she approached my sister's fraud like a contamination site that needed systematic remediation. "First, we need to make sure all your accounts are secure," she said, making notes on her tablet. "Second, we need to ensure you have copies of everything in multiple secure locations. Third, we need to document the property damage and get estimates for restoration. Fourth, we need to prepare for the criminal proceedings and potential civil trial." "When did my life become a legal strategy session?" I asked, staring into my glass. "When your sister decided to commit multiple felonies against you." Teresa's voice was matter of fact. "But here's what you need to understand. You're going to win this. Not because karma exists or because justice always prevails, but because you have evidence, resources, and the willingness to follow through. Most people in your situation would cave under family pressure. You're not going to do that. Mom said I'm dead to her if I press charges. Then she made her choice. You didn't ask Vanessa to steal from you. You didn't ask your mother to prioritize a thief over a victim. You're allowed to protect yourself, even from family, especially from family." Teresa poured us both another drink. "Besides, your mom will come around eventually. When Vanessa inevitably does this to someone else and the pattern becomes undeniable, your mom will have to face reality." The next morning, we drove into town to meet with contractors for estimates on returning the kitchen to something closer to its original condition. The white cabinets Vanessa had installed were cheaply made despite their expensive price tag, already showing wear after just a few months. The quartz countertops were fine quality, but they did not fit the cabin's aesthetic at all. A contractor named James walked through the space, taking measurements and photos. He was in his 50s with calloused hands and a kind face that reminded me of my father. "I can restore this to match the original style," he said after examining everything. "Keep the quartz if you want to save money, but replace the cabinets with custom pine to match the rest of the house. We can also source vintage-style fixtures to replace what was removed. The sink will be the hardest part. Finding another farmhouse sink in that condition and age might take some time." How much time? I asked. Could be weeks, could be months. Estate sales, antique dealers, restoration suppliers. I have contacts, but these things can't be rushed if you want it done right. He pulled out a calculator. Total cost would be around $30,000 for the cabinets and fixtures. If you want me to hunt down Portuguese tiles like the ones you described, that could add another 5 to 10,000 depending on what I can find. Another chunk of money I had not planned to spend, but I authorized the work. Catherine had assured me that I could include restoration costs in my civil suit against Vanessa, though actually collecting would be another matter. While we were in town, Detective Russell called. The district attorney is moving forward with charges, multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and forgery. Given the amounts involved and the premeditation, we're looking at significant jail time if she's convicted. She'll be arrested within the next 48 hours. My stomach flipped. Hearing it stated so officially made it real in a way it had not been before. My sister was going to be arrested. There would be a trial. Our family would be forced to confront what she had done. What do I need to do? I asked. Just be available for testimony when the time comes and stay safe. Make sure your security is updated, cameras are working, doors are locked. People facing felony charges sometimes make desperate decisions. After we hung up, Teresa looked at me seriously. Do you want to stay at a hotel in town until this is over? We could pack up and leave today. I looked around the cabin, at the mountains visible through the windows, at the space my grandmother had helped me create. No, this is mine. I'm not letting Vanessa drive me out of my own home. Then we're installing better locks and I'm staying until the arrest happens. Teresa squeezed my shoulder. No arguments. That afternoon, while a locksmith installed new deadbolts and upgraded the security system, I finally called Mom. She answered on the first ring, her voice icy. I hoped you were calling to tell me you came to your senses, she said. Vanessa stole over $130,000 from me, Mom. That's not a mistake. That's not a cry for help. That's systematic criminal fraud that's been going on for years. I kept my voice level, refusing to get emotional. She's being arrested in the next 2 days. You could stop this if you wanted to. You could drop the charges. No, I couldn't. Identity theft is prosecuted by the state, not by victims. And even if I could drop charges, I wouldn't. She needs to face consequences for once in her life. She's your sister, Mom's voice cracked. How can you do this to family? She did this to family first, Mom. She stole from me. She violated my trust. She committed crimes against me. And instead of being horrified by what she did, you're trying to make me the villain for protecting myself. I took a breath. I love you, but if you can't support me in this, then we don't have anything more to say to each other right now. You're choosing money over your sister. I'm choosing boundaries over enabling. There's a difference. I paused. Vanessa has needed help for years, real help, professional help, but instead of getting it for her, everyone just kept giving her money and second chances and pretending that this time would be different. Well, this is what different looks like. This is what consequences look like. And maybe, just maybe, hitting bottom will finally force her to change. Mom was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I don't know how to accept that my daughter is a criminal. Then I suggest you talk to a therapist, because it's the truth whether you accept it or not. My own voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Mom. I'm trying to survive what's been done to me. If you can't understand that, I'm sorry. We hung up without resolving anything, but at least I had said what I needed to say. Teresa made dinner while I sat on the porch watching the sunset and trying to process everything that had happened in the past few days. You did good today, Teresa said, bringing me a plate of pasta. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you're handling this exactly right. It feels awful. Most right things do at first. She sat beside me. But you'll get through this. And on the other side, you'll have your life back, your security back, and boundaries that actually mean something. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that justice would prevail, that Vanessa would face consequences, that my family would eventually understand why I had to do this. But belief felt impossible when everything hurt this much. Vanessa was arrested on a Thursday morning. Detective Russell called to inform me at 10, his voice professional, but not without sympathy. She was taken into custody at her boyfriend's apartment in Boulder. No incident. She'll be arraigned tomorrow. He paused. I want you to know that when we arrested her, we found additional evidence. She had your passport, original birth certificate, and several other documents she took from the cabin. She also had 3 more credit cards in your name that she hadn't used yet. My hands went cold. She was planning to continue. It appears so. That's going to strengthen the prosecution's case significantly. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was an ongoing criminal enterprise. He cleared his throat. The arraignment is at 2 tomorrow at the Boulder County Courthouse. You're not required to be there, but you're welcome to attend. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Teresa found me like that, still and silent on the sofa. She was arrested, I said. Teresa sat beside me, not speaking, just being present. Finally, I turned to her. I want to go to the arraignment. I want to see her face when she has to answer for what she did. Then we'll go, Teresa said simply. The next day, we drove to Boulder in Teresa's rental car. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone with protesters outside advocating for various causes. Inside, the security process was thorough. We found the correct courtroom and took seats in the public gallery. The room filled slowly with lawyers, court staff, and other observers. Then Vanessa was brought in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her blonde hair hung limp around her face, and her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. When she saw me sitting in the gallery, her expression transformed. Shock, then hurt, then pure hatred. She said something to the public defender beside her, gesturing toward me. The lawyer shook his head, speaking quietly to her. The arraignment was quick and procedural. The charges were read. 3 counts of identity theft, 6 counts of fraud, 2 counts of forgery. Each charge carried potential prison time. Bail was set at $75,000, an amount I knew Vanessa could not possibly pay. How does the defendant plead? The judge asked. Not guilty, Your Honor, the public defender said. The judge set a preliminary hearing date for 3 weeks later and remanded Vanessa back to custody until bail could be posted. As she was let out, Vanessa turned to look at me again. This time there were tears streaming down her face, and she mouthed something that looked like please. I looked away. Outside the courthouse, my phone immediately buzzed with a call from Mom. I declined it, then a text appeared. I was at the arraignment. I saw you there. How could you sit there and watch your sister suffer like that? So Mom had been there too, somewhere I had not noticed her. The thought that we had been in the same room, both watching Vanessa's public humiliation, and had not even acknowledged each other, felt like another ending. Teresa drove us back to Aspen in silence, letting me process. When we arrived at the cabin, I found a letter taped to the front door, my name on the envelope in Vanessa's handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away, but Teresa stopped me. Read it first. You might need it for evidence. I opened it carefully. The letter inside was 4 pages of barely legible, desperate handwriting. Chloe, you've destroyed my life. I'm in jail because of you. Mom is devastated. Everyone in the family is blaming me because you've convinced them I'm some kind of monster. But you know the truth. You know that I only did this because I was desperate, because I needed help and you were never there for me. You were always too busy with your fancy career and your perfect life to care about what I was going through. Yes, I used your credit cards. Yes, I renovated the kitchen. But I did it to improve your property. I did it to make your cabin nicer. And instead of being grateful, you have me arrested like a common criminal. I'm sorry I took some documents. I wasn't going to do anything with them. I just wanted to feel like I had some security, some backup plan in case things got bad again. You have no idea what it's like to live with constant financial anxiety while watching your sister live a life of luxury. I'm not the villain here. You are. You're the one who refused to help family. You're the one who chose money over love. You're the one who will have to live with the consequences of putting me in prison. I'll never forgive you for this. Never. The letter went on, cycling through blame, manipulation, and occasional glimpses of what might have been genuine pain. But nowhere in those 4 pages was an actual apology. Nowhere did she take real responsibility for what she had done. I handed the letter to Teresa, who read it with an increasingly grim expression. She really believes this, Teresa said finally. She genuinely thinks she's the victim here. I know. I felt tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. She's always been able to rewrite reality in her own mind. Whatever she needs to believe to avoid accountability, that becomes her truth. Are you okay? Teresa asked gently. I thought about it honestly. No, but I will be. The preliminary hearing 3 weeks later revealed more evidence I had not known existed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Diana Martinez, presented a devastating case. The contractors who had worked on the cabin testified that Vanessa had forged my signature on multiple contracts. She had presented herself as the owner of the property and had even shown them a fake deed she had created using my personal documents. Financial investigators testified about the systematic nature of her fraud. The 3 credit cards she had opened years earlier, the personal loan, the dozens of smaller charges that had been spread across multiple accounts, always just under the threshold that might trigger alerts. It painted a picture of someone who had been carefully, methodically stealing from me for at least 4 years. I testified about finding her in the cabin, about discovering the renovations, about the moment I realized the full scope of the betrayal. Diana walked me through each discovery, making sure the judge understood not just the financial impact, but the emotional violation. How did it feel when you realized your sister had been living in your home without permission? Diana asked. Like everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie, I answered honestly. Like I had been protecting someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. Vanessa's public defender tried to paint her as desperate, as someone suffering from mental health issues who had made poor choices under duress. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ordered her held for trial, denying bail reduction. As I left the courthouse that day, I encountered Mom in the hallway. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by the stress of the past month. We stared at each other for a long moment. Are you happy now? She asked finally. Is this what you wanted? I wanted my sister not to steal from me, I replied evenly. I wanted my family to support me when I was victimized. I wanted someone to hold Vanessa accountable before it got to this point. But we don't always get what we want, do we? She's going to prison. Mom's voice broke. My daughter is going to prison. Your daughter committed felonies repeatedly for years. I kept my voice gentle but firm. I'm sorry that hurts you. I'm sorry this is happening. But Vanessa made these choices, not me. If you want to be angry with someone, be angry with her for putting all of us in this position. Mom shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know you anymore. Maybe you never did, I said quietly. Maybe you only knew the version of me who would let herself be hurt to keep the peace. I walked away, Teresa beside me, and did not look back. The trial was set for 8 weeks later. In the meantime, my fraud disputes were being resolved. The credit card companies, faced with video evidence and criminal charges, were reversing most of the charges. The personal loan was being cleared from my credit report. My credit score, which had been devastated by Vanessa's actions, was slowly recovering. Catherine filed the civil suit against Vanessa, seeking full restitution plus damages. She'll never be able to pay this, Catherine warned me. Even if she works for the rest of her life, she'll probably never have this kind of money. I know, I said, but I want it on record. I want there to be legal documentation of exactly what she took from me. The cabin was slowly being restored. James and his crew had removed the white cabinets and were building custom pine replacements that matched the original style. The kitchen was starting to look like mine again, like the space my grandmother and I had envisioned. Teresa had to return to Portland for work, but she called every other day to check on me. Aunt Dorothy visited twice, bringing homemade soup and fierce moral support. A few cousins reached out quietly, admitting they believed me and were appalled by what Vanessa had done. But the majority of my family sided with Mom and Vanessa. I was uninvited from a cousin's wedding. My uncle sent a long email about forgiveness and family loyalty that conveniently ignored what had been done to me. Relatives I had not spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about my choices. I learned to live with being cast as the villain. It hurt, but it also clarified things. The people who truly cared about me understood. The people who prioritized comfort over justice were showing me exactly who they were. The trial, when it finally came, lasted 3 days. I testified again, this time to a jury. They listened carefully as Diana presented the evidence piece by piece, building an unassailable case. The security footage of Vanessa photographing my credit cards, the forged signatures, the systematic pattern of theft over years, my testimony about the impact on my finances, my credit, my sense of safety. Vanessa testified in her own defense, and it was painful to watch. She cried. She apologized, finally saying she knew what she had done was wrong, but that she had been desperate. She painted herself as someone who had made terrible mistakes out of need, not malice. But Diana's cross-examination was thorough. She walked Vanessa through each lie, each manipulation, each calculated theft. By the end, even Vanessa's public defender looked defeated. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing happened 2 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom, the same one where this had all begun months earlier, and watched as the judge reviewed the case file. Vanessa stood at the defense table, her orange jumpsuit replaced with ill-fitting civilian clothes her lawyer had provided. She looked thinner, her face gaunt and pale under the fluorescent lights. Diana presented a sentencing recommendation: 8 years in state prison, followed by probation and mandatory restitution. The defense argued for leniency, citing Vanessa's lack of prior criminal history, her supposed mental health issues, and her family obligations. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood, my legs steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system, and faced my sister directly. Vanessa and I grew up together, I began. I protected her on the playground. I helped her with homework. I loaned her money when she needed it. I co-signed leases. I gave her places to stay. I did these things because I loved her, and because I believed family took care of each other. But somewhere along the way, Vanessa started seeing me not as her sister, but as a resource to exploit. She didn't just steal money from me, she stole my sense of security. She stole my ability to trust. She violated every boundary and relationship we had. And she did it systematically, deliberately, over years. The hardest part isn't the financial damage, though that's been devastating. The hardest part is realizing that someone I loved viewed me with such contempt that she believed she was entitled to destroy my financial stability for her convenience. The hardest part is knowing that even now, after everything, she still doesn't truly understand that what she did was wrong. She's sorry she got caught, not sorry she hurt me. I don't want Vanessa to suffer, but I do want her to face real consequences for the first time in her life. I want her to understand that actions have repercussions, and I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that she can't do this to anyone else while she's incarcerated. I sat down. Vanessa was crying, but she did not look at me. Mom, sitting in the gallery, had her face in her hands. The judge took a moment, reviewing documents before speaking. This court has reviewed all the evidence presented. The defendant engaged in a sophisticated, long-term pattern of identity theft and fraud against her own sister. The breach of trust here is profound, the financial damage is extensive, and the lack of genuine remorse is concerning. Vanessa, you are sentenced to 6 years in the Colorado Department of Corrections, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $132,472 plus interest. You will also be required to complete mental health counseling and financial literacy courses as conditions of your eventual release. The gavel came down with finality. Vanessa let out a choked sob as the bailiff moved forward to take her back into custody. As she was led away, she turned to look at me one final time. Her face was a mixture of devastation and anger, tears streaming down her cheeks, mascara leaving dark trails. Her mouth formed words I could not hear, but the hatred in her eyes was unmistakable. I felt nothing but relief. Outside the courthouse, Mom approached me one final time. She looked broken, aged beyond her years by the stress of the trial and its outcome. 6 years, she whispered. My baby is going to prison for 6 years. Your baby committed crimes that warranted a decade, I replied quietly. She got a relatively light sentence considering everything she did. I'll never forgive you for this. Mom's voice was hollow. You've taken my daughter from me. She took herself from you when she chose to commit felonies. I just refused to be her victim anymore. I paused, feeling something inside me finally settle. I hope someday you can see that. I hope someday you can understand that protecting yourself isn't betrayal. But if you can't, I accept that. I'm at peace with my choices. I walked away from her, from the courthouse, from that chapter of my life. Teresa was waiting by the car, having flown in again for the sentencing. She hugged me tightly. It's over, she said. It's over, I agreed. In the aftermath of the trial, Vanessa's life collapsed in ways beyond incarceration. Her boyfriend left her within a week of her conviction. Friends who had believed her version of events abandoned her once the full truth became public. She lost the small online following she had built for her supposed jewelry business when bloggers covered the story of her fraud conviction. The narrative she had constructed of being a struggling entrepreneur, victimized by a cruel sister, crumbled under the weight of court documents and video evidence. In prison, she faced the daily reality of her choices, with no one to manipulate, no credit cards to steal, no family money to access. She was, for the first time in her adult life, forced to survive on her own merit, and by all accounts, she struggled profoundly. As for me, I returned to my cabin in the mountains, restored now to something close to what it had been before Vanessa's violation. James had found a farmhouse sink almost identical to my original one at an estate sale in New Mexico. The Portuguese tiles took longer, but through a connection, he located a small cache of vintage tiles from the same region, painted in a similar style. They were not exactly the same, but they honored the spirit of what had been lost. I sat on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the peaks in shades of gold and crimson, and felt something I had not experienced in months. Peace. My grandmother had been right about roots, about having a place that was mine alone. I had fought to keep it, paid a high price in family relationships and emotional turmoil. But in the end, I had won. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had finally learned that protecting myself was not selfishness. It was survival. The aspens would turn golden again in autumn. The snow would come and blanket everything in white silence. And I would be here, in the sanctuary my grandmother helped me create, breathing properly again at 8,000 feet, finally free.